Okay, ladies and gentlemen, okay.
No, not at all.
If you could take your seats, ladies and gentlemen, that would be great. Now, look, there are loads and loads and loads of questions. I'm absolutely sure we will not get through all of them. I've tried to pick the ones which I think are covering the subjects which you focused on. Please, if you don't get your question asked, I'm sorry, we'll be here all night if we did all of them. So we are going to just, if you'd accept the choice, I'm going to try and be as fair as I can. The way it's going to work is I'm going to ask the question, and I'm going to ask all the candidates to answer each question. I'm going to ask you to be very brief so that we can get through as many as possible. The first question, which I think is a kind of good portmanteau, and let's just go from the right. I don't mean the right in any other political way. Let's go from the far right, shall we?
Let's not.
David, it's just... Yes. Oh, hello. Oh, we got a division on the right, ladies and gentlemen. I did suggest a tub of lard, but, you know, that wasn't accepted. Anyway, so the question is, very good question. I'm going to read them out, I think, if that's okay. This is Simon Crisp's question, because not everybody's put their name on the question. But the question is very, very sharp. What are your local priorities? And I'm going to ask you to nominate 3 and be quick. So, David, 3 local priorities.
Social housing. There's a crisis. We need to sort that out. Employment. Around here, wages are lower. And there are less jobs. There are only 2 jobs for every 3 working people. That's way lower than everything else. That's a failure of our local government. We need to get a proper economic development group growing in the area.
Fantastic. Layla, what are your 3 local priorities?
So a couple that I've talked about: improving access to doctors and dentists, making sure that people can get access to primary care in a timely fashion, an A27 bypass around Lancing and Worthing to alleviate the congestion and pollution that we see that's causing misery for constituents. And I'm going to add one more in, which is to sort out secondary school places, because I know that's also a pressing issue, and we need to work with local schools to find solutions that will enable them to accommodate children locally.
Okay, Tom.
Same as Layla's last one, pushing West Sussex County Council to deliver properly on the secondary school shortages here in Shoreham, and that will be one of the very first things I do if I'm elected next week. Secondly, sewage, holding Southern Water to account, and trying to end the sewage that's going into our seas, and with tough new measures on water companies and the bosses running them. Thirdly, I think around transport and active travel, you don't just need to know about the state of the roads and the potholes, but also what we can do around sustainable travel infrastructure, implementing the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and having proper safe cycle routes across the constituency, including the A259.
Okay. All popular with the Arts Council crowd.
I don't have too much to add to my colleagues. Certainly for me, it would absolutely be the whole flooding issue. We had people wading through inches of water to deliver during the local elections. Secondly, I would say it would absolutely be transport here and enabling us to have decent cycle paths and work together to work out how we're going to have healthier, safer transport in the area. And the third thing is actually something personal that somebody wrote to me about in advance of the election, and that is there's a scandal regarding loans, the loan charge scandal. There's something like 70,000 people caught up in it nationally. 10 people have committed suicide over it. None of us know about it. And the brief amount of research I've done has just been outrageous. And I've been written to by a constituent about that, and I would have to look into that in detail. It feels like another post office scandal just waiting to come.
Okay. Now, this is a nice question. Sometimes backbench MPs are champions for particular causes, e.g. Jess Phillips on tackling violence against women or Tim Lawton on Tibet. What could we expect? What could we expect you to be a personal champion of? I'd just like to say that's of what could we expect you to be a personal champion? And keep it personal. Assume we know your party's policy. So
My question, it was a personal champion in terms of climate change and biodiversity.
would you allow me to broaden it though? Because
I'd like you to keep it to be a person.
well, I'd like to ask both. What would you like to do in terms of the climate change, but also
That would be your question.
no, it would be also good to know, would it not, what they would champion personally beyond that? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Are you a lawyer? Right. Apparently, you're not allowed to choose what you would champion, according to this man. You only got to champion terms of climate and biodiversity. It says keep it personal.
Crikey.
Okay, is that your answer?
No, it isn't. I think just education in terms of recycling, reusing, white goods being fit for purpose, trying to really do our bit to manage the footprint that we have.
Tom?
I think it would be about expanding renewable sources locally, whether that's the Rampion extension and taking advantage of all the sun and wind that we have here on the south coast and channeling that into renewable energy and making sure that local communities benefit from it too.
Layla?
I think it would be about committing to expanding the award-winning work we've done around reclaiming the pad farms and the kelp project, which we've been, leading on, and it's been the subject of documentaries. And we're doing great work, and we can only serve, I think, to improve the biodiversity of our area and to, bring about even more positive change. I think and build on.
David?
I think there's a huge gap between say and do on all things to do with the environment. So what I will champion is there needs to be a duty of care for anyone, whether you work for a local authority or an environment. There needs to be a duty of care for the environment, which has legal penalties when you fall short.
This is a question from Laura. I'll read this out. All parties are campaigning about terrible sewage problems, but they're also talking about the need for more houses. How will your party encourage building more houses when the environment is already at its limit? If we can start with you, David.
So we're building the wrong sort of houses in the wrong place. What we need is more social housing. So what we need to do is to free up the local authority so they can designate sites not just for housing. So developers come in and develop it for private houses. We need to be able to develop a site for social housing so we get the right thing built in the right place.
Layla?
Well, I would echo what David said. Actually, I received a manifesto from the Ada Community Land Trust, and I'd just like to say I'm really inspired by the work that they are doing, and I would fully commit to supporting them if I got the chance. I think. Sorry, can you just remind me what
It is, how will your party build more houses when the environment is already at its limit?
But it's also about getting developers to commit the right amount of money to the infrastructure that's required to make sure that we are building houses and that they are fully funding the infrastructure that's needed so that we can have those houses without increasing our sewage problems.
Tom?
I think part of it's about upgrading the sewage infrastructure that the companies have failed to do over many years since they were privatised, and we want to hold them to account on that because we're going to need to improve the infrastructure because it already isn't doing very well. When it comes to housing, the truth is we need more housing of all kinds. I'm not going to stand by and see people's children and grandchildren forced to move away from their families to get on in life. That's not acceptable, and we can't have that. So we do need more social housing, and we failed to build enough in recent years. And in fact, it was the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats in government who banned councils from borrowing to build social housing, and that's why we're building so few social homes. So there's an answer there on that. So we need more affordable homes. We need more homes of all kinds, and I'm very keen to see that and see it done in a way that is sustainable with modern developments that take into all of these kind of things into account.
Debbie?
Well, we have a part of the manifesto is dedicated to the right homes, right place, right price charter. And part of what I've already talked about today is the whole idea of planning, transforming the planning system. And one of the things that we need to do is stop what's happening with current building, which is new buildings are not being produced with alternative sources of power. We need to make sure that those buildings that are being built in the right place at the right price are done so with that right modern infrastructure that will enable those homes to be ecologically sound and sustainable and reduce people's bills. Because what we know from delays on climate, the OBR has said failing to tackle the climate crisis is going to lead to long-term costs for us as a nation.
There's two questions related here to schools.
Can I just come back on Tom? So it wasn't right what you said. In fact, when the Liberal Democrats were in coalition, we got 190,000 new social housing built, which was the first time in 30 years.
But did the government not ban councils from borrowing to build so that they were able to build more? They would have been able to build more under that system.
That was an existing Conservative, that was one of the Conservative policies.
Okay, but there's two questions here. One is whether they built 190,000 homes. Fine.
Yes, they did.
But your point is a different one, as I understand it. Your point is that actually you could have then borrowed. They put restrictions on borrowing.
Would have been built, yeah.
Yeah. But it's a slightly different point, is my point. So, but I mean, it's an interesting point too, is whether Rachel Reeves would allow councils to borrow more, because that's obviously going to increase the total of the national debt.
They are now able to borrow to build again, but they weren't for a very long time.
Yeah. So, OK, there's two questions about schools. One from Alistair Reid, who is the chair of governors of Swiss Gardens Primary, and one from Jade Sowa, I hope I've pronounced your name right, from FAST. The first is, this year, 18% of West Sussex schools were in deficit. In layman's terms, an overdraft they have to pay back from future years' budgets. That figure is predicted to rise to 40% next year, with primary schools particularly affected due to falling birth rates and income and mostly fixed costs. What will candidates do to help alleviate the imminent funding crisis for local schools? And the second, which is a related question, is we had 5 years of overcrowding and insufficient secondary school places in our district. Given that we know there are more children than school places locally, until at least 2030, what are you going to do about that? So two key questions. One is actually, what do you do about the falling rolls and the rising deficits? And what do you do about the question of existing demand before that starts to fall? And I can't remember what end of the table. You first last time, in which case, Debbie, it's you first this time.
So none of this should be a surprise. I've been working in the field of diversity and inclusion for 20 odd years, and we have known that there is a demographic bubble happening. We know that we're an ageing population. We know we've got a second bubble of coming along, so none of this should be a surprise. One of the things that we want to do is ensure that each child can have an education without having to track halfway across the countryside to get to a decent school. And beyond that, I will absolutely tell you with integrity that the education piece of this manifesto I have not swarmed up on. So I am not going to answer any further, Simon. I'm going to be completely honest about that.
Tom?
I've met with parents, governors and head teachers in recent months and know how difficult the funding situation for schools is. And in East Worthing and Shoreham, we are 517th out of 533 in the country for school funding per pupil, which is obviously very low down. And so that's something I would want to look to address. One of the things we are going to be doing, as I've said in my piece at the podium, is we're going to be looking to levy VAT on private schools to raise £1.3 billion to try and get some more money into schools for additional teachers, as well as our nursery places and free breakfast clubs for every primary school kid. But I know there's a lot more to do, and I hope if I am elected next week, I'll be able to meet with other schools and other head teachers to talk about that. When it comes to secondary school places, as I said earlier, that's going to be one of my very first priorities. I know how important it is for parents here in Shoreham who warned West Sussex County Council about it many years ago when the children were coming up through primary school, but they sat on their hands and didn't do anything. And now still, having commissioned a feasibility study, They're not releasing it despite it being finished. So they've not told they've not told parents, they've not told teachers what's going to be done or what the feasibility study has shown. And meanwhile, we're approaching another year of children about to apply for school places but not know where they're going to be going, and parents not knowing where their children are going to be going to school. So I will pick that up as soon as I can, but I'm very aware that a lot needs to be done quickly on it. So I will do my best on it.
Thank you. Layla?
So firstly, to come back on Tom's point around taxing by applying VAT to private school fees, my concern would be that actually that will increase the demand on secondary school places, because there are over 1,400 children in 7 schools across the constituency, and 308 of them are children with SEND needs who don't have an EHCP. So that will fall directly onto the parents or local authorities to fund those types of places. And actually, at the moment, those parents are saving the state sector around £7,500 per child per year. So if we don't have the capacity in our schools to accommodate those, I don't think the 1.3 billion is going to go far enough to accommodate that demand, let alone achieve any more teachers, because I think the national calculations are that it works out to about 1 extra whole-time equivalent across every 3 secondary schools. So just to come back on that, I think in general, we've seen locally, Shoreham Academy, where my son is currently in sixth form and has been for 6 years, is a very overscoped school and could clearly do with more space. I think I would absolutely champion the need for more funding for them to have the capital they require to expand the school. They could build on the Middle Road playing fields to expand the school and have the sixth form move off-site to enable the school to expand and build on the success that we've seen there over the last 14 years.
David?
Well, it's clearly a failure at West Sussex Council, and we see the same thing over and over again. It's not just with education. Representations get made to them. They say they're going to investigate. They say they've come up with a decision. They don't say how, and nothing ever changes. So yeah, we do need to see some proper change there. But then once you sort all that out, you've still got to put some proper funding into those schools. So the funding per pupil has drifted down and down and down over the last 10 years. In the same as we've done with pensions, we need to say that actually pupil funding is going to increase with inflation, and that's just got to be built in.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we could go to something which is in the national news today. One question, somebody signs themselves, I think RHB, which is, does the panel welcome the release of Julian Assange? Might seem a little bit distant from...
It is very so across the other side of the world.
East
now,
Worthing and Shoreham.
And there are a load of issues there. There is personal freedom. There's accountability on one side, and clearly there was a fairly big campaign to actually go out and get him. But at the end of the day, what he did put national security at risk, and a whole load of lives.
Let him finish his point.
And a whole load of lives. So whilst there were mitigating reasons why he didn't, I think probably to say, does one outweigh the other? Personally, I'm not so sure.
Layla.
Do you know, I've prepped for virtually every topic I could think of that would come up locally, and Julian Assange didn't come up even on my newsfeed today. I can't say that I have a strong opinion, other than to say that clearly, he was imprisoned for reasons that David's described. I don't know enough about the case that was made to try and free him. I guess we have to trust in the process that has taken place, and if it is deemed to be the right thing by the powers that be that know far more about it than me, then I have to trust in that.
Okay. Tom?
I'm not a particular fan of Julian Assange. I think, he released lists of informants in Afghanistan, which resulted in them being put in serious danger, and had they said they had it coming for being informants. So not a big fan of that. I think also his assistance to Trump and Putin is not something I would welcome. So I don't really care about Julian Assange.
Debbie?
I think it is. I think it is a tricky one. But I think one of the things that's really dear to our party's values is truth and integrity and speaking truth to power. And I think some of the information that he leaked is just devastating. What happened to those poor people that were just completely obliterated off the face of the planet. So I think it's a really, really complex question. But I think we have to not allow governments to hide behind Official Secrets Act when human atrocities are being carried out in the name of nation states.
Okay, just staying on sort of international things, which is, will you you may not have an answer to yes or no to this, but let's take it as a general subject because it's rather niche, but it's interesting, which is, will you commit to reform the British Museum Act and the National Heritage Act? This is about enabling national museums to return cultural properties to countries and communities of origin. So you may not, I suspect, know about the detail of the particular act, so don't feel perhaps you have to stick to that if the question will allow me to do that. But the general point would be, do you think that's something that should now happen, I guess is the question.
Certainly from a Green Party perspective, one of the things that we need to do is to look at repatriation of items like that. And I don't know the detail of the act, so thank you for that get out of jail card. But clearly we have to look at the facts, and our history has its hands on some horrible, corrosive, exploitative behaviour over the years. And we have to wake up and say, we're in 2024, we have to do the right thing, and we have to find a different way of being other than saying that it was empire, this is great, let's all rule Britannia. Yeah, I think we have to open the door to those kind of conversations.
Sorry, Tom?
I've got to admit, it's not an act I'm aware of or have heard of, but
take the general principle. What do you think?
I think it's something I'd be willing to look at and meet with the people who are pushing it to hear more about it. It's not something I know very much about, in all honesty, but I can certainly see the arguments for and many against too on that one.
One might commend you for saying that you don't know the issue and you want to find out more, so that would be fair. Layla, how would you feel?
I guess I would have a similar response. I think we, and I can say this as the party committed to preserving traditionalism and values, but actually it's we need to ensure the safety of those artefacts, don't we? I think that's the main thing. They are all part of our joint history, and as long as we could ensure their safety. And the ability for them to be enjoyed by future generations wherever they go, then I think it's certainly something that we should look at and commit to exploring further.
I think we have to think about whose history it is.
Okay. David?
I think many museums and organisations are doing this off their own bat. They're looking at how they came about getting a lot of the stuff and taking the appropriate action. It feels like we've moved on as a society, and it's probably not a law we need anymore. I think we've got better things to be doing.
Okay. To all candidates, do you support, and this is starting with you, David, do you support an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza?
How can you not? You said you wanted short.
Layla?
I think it's a really tricky issue. I think Israel has the right to defend itself. I think it's using disproportionate force, and so I would call on both sides to reach a peaceful agreement, and that would lead to a ceasefire.
Tom?
Yes, an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and immediately the unimpeded aid to Gaza.
Hang on, let Tom finish. Go on.
Yeah, I said, so an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and undisrupted aid flowing into Gaza, absolutely.
Debbie?
Absolutely. Our party is the party of peace. We're the first party that stood up to call for the ceasefire and the cease of arms sales to Israel. And absolutely, we would support that.
There's quite a lot of controversy, isn't there, around, and it was the point that was made about Israel defending itself, and Tom's mentioned the hostages and so on and so forth. Would you, let me ask an additional question to that, is would you condemn the act of Hamas on October the 7th?
I think clearly what happened on October the 7th is absolutely appalling and atrocious, and yes, but we have to understand that none of these things can be seen just in that moment in time. There's a 70-year history of which Western Europe has its hands all over in terms of what led to the conflict in the first place.
Tom, would you condemn October the 7th?
Yeah, absolutely. I know someone who lost a family member in those attacks, and I don't think they brought us any closer to peace, much as what's happened since has not either. And if we cannot see the humanity of Israelis and we cannot see the humanity of Palestinians, we're never, ever going to get closer to peace. The only solution is a political one, and it does feel quite far away right now. I know that. And I think it's very frustrating when we feel quite powerless to do much about it. We've called for a ceasefire. President Biden has called for a ceasefire, and it hasn't happened yet. I don't think Hamas are interested in peace, and I'm not sure Netanyahu is either. And I think that's the tough problem that we're facing at the moment.
Leila?
Like I said, I think it's. Sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question? I was so engrossed. I was actually going to agree with Tom wholeheartedly. Yeah, actually, but go on, repeat.
Well, it was really your position on what happened on October the 7th and Hamas's.
Well, you know, it was a completely unacceptable and horrific event, which innocent people were caught up between a political struggle, and clearly it shouldn't have happened. And I think, you know, absolutely we should condemn the use of violence in all cases such as this, and seek to, you know, as Tom said, reach a political solution which would see the you know, the stopping of those kinds of events in future, because, you know, they're not. These are innocent people and they're caught up, and I think that's, you know, the thing that we have to remember in trying to achieve a peaceful solution for both sides.
Okay.
Well, I think the October 7th is a atrocity of a global scale, and I think it's a failure of the international community that it hasn't actually got in there and played a leading role in sorting it out. Israel clearly had a right to defend itself, but I think what we've seen since, and what America has said, what the EU said, and what we've said, they've gone up to very close and maybe over a line of what is acceptable, and the international court is looking into that. I think there's a failure there that they're now saying they're going to take 2 years to do that. So I think for us just to blame one side or the other in something that is so important for the whole world, actually the international community needs to be much more bold about coming in and dealing with both sides of this, because this is going to affect us all.
Thank you. It feels like, so this is about the Worthing bypass. So if we're kind of slight change of gear here, but obviously that's politics. One day you're dealing with that, and next day you're down here. But given that any bypass of Worthing will necessarily be built through the national park or farmland, how do you justify this ambition with concern for the environment?
We're on a hiding to nothing here. You've got one route that is going to take down a whole load of houses in North Lancing, which isn't feasible. You've got another route which says it's going to tunnel for miles and miles under the town. Yeah, that's just never going to happen. And the third route says that it's the route up from Shoreham, over Stenning, through the bypass, over to Washington, and then down again. Well, that's nuts. You may as well sit in the traffic and do that. So, we kind of, again, it's a failure of West Sussex. The first inquiry in this, I think, was 1980 something. It's just gone on and on and on. The world has moved on. So we've actually now got to work out, how do we upgrade the route as is? The proposals that have been put forward by West Sussex at the moment are, quite frankly, well, they're crap is the only word for it. They just don't do the job. So we've got to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new plan for how do we get through Worthing.
Leila.
So I guess my justification is that I'm listening to constituents, and that's what they're telling me that they want. And I know that it's been, as you say, in train far longer than I've been involved in politics. But actually, what I've committed to them is bringing a fresh enthusiasm to fighting for a solution that will see a reduction in the congestion and pollution that we're already experiencing. So part of my justification is about the removal of that. I do think of the three options that David outlined, the one that seems to be potentially the most feasible, I suppose, is the expansion of the Stenning Road. And
That puts the most miles through the national park, and that actually is. And
Hang on.
And that actually is not going to reduce the travel time, so it's pointless.
So there's an
Well, it
argument.
may reduce the congestion, though. But yes, yeah. Anyway, my justification is I'm listening to constituents, and that's what they would like me to do.
Tom.
I think on this one, I know it's been campaigned for a very long time, and it hasn't happened. And I think what we need to be doing is looking at all transport options. I talked a bit earlier about active travel and trying to get more cycle infrastructure on the coast road. But I think we also need to be looking at rail. We need to be looking at buses, and we will bring the rail franchises back into public ownership and try and make services more affordable and reliable. And similarly with buses, put local authorities in control of them so they can choose the routes, they can choose the pricings to make active travel and public transport more accessible, because the truth is often when you build more roads they simply fill with more traffic, and people, you're never in traffic, you are traffic, and I'm a driver too, so I know it, and I think we need to be looking at all of the options there.
Okay, that's the policy framework, but there is something on the table, and there's the different options. So would you back one or none of the options?
I want to look at all of them, but I think, as I say, I'm not sure the feasibility of it at the moment because of where we are financially as a country and the inheritance we're being left with. And I know that smaller edits to the A27 that have been suggested were all rejected by local residents recently. So it's clearly a tricky issue, and it's not one I'm going to be rushed into backing a bypass because another candidate's promising one that they have no power to make happen.
Debbie.
Well, I think I keep banging on about our manifesto, but it's a really good read. Our manifesto says clearly we want to return at least 30% of UK seas and land back to nature. So it feels as though cutting a bypass right through the Downs National Park would not be the right thing to do. And clearly what we do need to do, if you travel anywhere, and I've travelled extensively across the continent on public transport, on trains, on buses, bicycles, we are so far behind what the rest of the world is doing. We've really got to catch up.
Let me ask you a final question, each one of you. Lego. Lego is an open source organisation. So if you propose to Lego a design and say, I would really like to make this, and they think that's got a sales potential and therefore they would enable you to do it, what, Debbie, what would you propose to Lego as the design you'd like them to make available to the rest of us?
Oh gosh, well I've got a son sitting in the audience that absolutely loves Lego, so I'd be really pushed between one of those, what are those Japanese trains, the ones that travel at 200 miles an hour called, versus maybe something like a push bike with kids on the back or a wheelchair on the back, so that we could actually bring those that maybe can't travel so easily around with us.
Tom?
I feel like they make Lego for everything these days. You always see in my Twitter feed they're making new things. Probably something from a video game I used to play as a kid, I imagine.
Which was?
The Legend of Zelda. I liked it quite a lot.
The Legend of who?
Zelda. I like that quite a lot, so I'd pick something from that.
Okay. Layla?
Do you know, what, I mean, I you know, and people who know me well will know I always favour practical presence. But in this case, I would have to create some sort of Jurassic Park style dinosaur set for my 3-year-old who is absolutely obsessed and can name at least 10 dinosaurs confidently. So yeah, I think I would go close to home. It is his birthday on Friday. 3 years ago today,
Okay.
I was preparing to go to hospital to have him. So there we are. That's
Great. David?
Probably some kind of mountain bike that would stop me getting slower and slower every time I try to get up to Chanctonbury Ring.
Fantastic. Look, one of the great things about this is that these people are standing in front of you. They're offering you themselves, if you like, kind of naked to the world, to be probbed and probed and prompted by all of you. And it's a great democratic exercise. So thank you for involving yourselves in this and all the questions. But thank the candidates who've, you know, done their very best. And again, just to thank Ropetackle, an extraordinary organisation that runs entirely on the indentured labour of some really wonderful people who give their time for free, and also to the Shoreham Society that I know does great work in the area. So thank you all. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to the candidates. The bar is still open, which will add to their funds, and get home safely.